have jobs. They receive paychecks. Their kids still go to school. But when the workday ends, thousands of American families aren't going home. They're going back to parking lots and sleeping in cars. America's housing crisis has crossed a terrifying line, and what you're about to see proves just how badly the system is broken. For generations, Americans were taught a simple rule: get a job, work hard, and you will at least keep a roof over your head. The housing crisis is breaking that rule. Federal homelessness researchers report that estimates suggest as many as 40 to 60% of people experiencing homelessness actually have a job. Employment can lower the risk of homelessness, but a paycheck no longer guarantees that a worker can afford the housing available near that job. The problem is basic math. A worker may earn $15, $18, or $20 an hour, but gross pay is not spendable pay. Taxes come out first, then health insurance, transportation, gasoline, food, childcare, and debt payments follow. A family can bring home thousands a month and still fail an apartment's income requirement, or find nothing left once rent is paid. Housing experts generally consider a household cost burdened once housing eats more than 30% of income. Yet recently, well over 20 million renter households, nearly half of all renters nationwide, were already above that line. More than 12 million of them were severely burdened, spending over half their income on housing alone. This is how a working family becomes homeless, without anyone losing a job. They keep clocking in, but their housing costs climb faster than their income ever can. America is now facing an uncomfortable truth. You can wear a uniform, keep a schedule, pay your taxes, and still end up sleeping in a vehicle at night. This crisis is no longer only about unemployment. It is about the widening gap between what work pays and what a home costs. The clearest way to understand America's housing crisis is to look at what remains of a paycheck after rent is paid. Housing researchers found that cost-burdened renters recently reached a record high, topping 22 million households. Renters earning under $30,000 a year were left, on average, with only about $250 a month for everything else. Think about what $250 must cover: food, gasoline, insurance, a phone bill, medicine, clothing, school costs, repairs, and any emergency that month. That is not a cushion, that is a countdown. A single parent earning $2,500 a month cannot safely absorb $1,400 or $1,600 in housing costs. Once rent and utilities are paid, what is left disappears fast. If the car needs a $700 repair, that may still be necessary just to keep working. So the family delays rent instead. If a child gets sick and a parent misses shifts, the next paycheck shrinks. A late fee appears. Then another bill goes unpaid. This is why an ordinary money problem can turn into a housing emergency. These families are not spending carelessly. Many simply have nothing left after rent to build savings. The 30% guideline sounds abstract until a household spends 50, 60, or 70% of its income just to keep an apartment. Every other need then fights for the same shrinking cash. Eventually, something gives way. For a growing number of families, the car is not the first choice. It is what remains once the paycheck can no longer stretch far enough to cover the rent. America's housing crisis is creating a strange contradiction. Communities need workers they can no longer afford to house. Restaurants need cooks. Hospitals need caregivers. Schools need aides. Warehouses need workers. Hotels need housekeepers. Stores need cashiers. The people doing these jobs are often priced out of the communities they work in. The affordable housing shortage is enormous. Researchers estimate the country is short more than 7 million rental homes, both affordable and available to extremely low-income renters. Nationwide, there are only about 35 affordable homes for every 100 of those households. This shortage exists in every state and metro area. That means 100 households effectively compete for 35 realistic units. The other 65 do not vanish. They pay more than they can afford, move in with relatives, crowd into shared housing, use motels, or enter shelters. Moving farther from work creates its own problem. A cheaper apartment 40 to 60 miles away can mean a longer commute, more gasoline, higher vehicle costs, and harder childcare. For an hourly worker, one broken car can threaten both job and housing. The crisis becomes a geographic trap. Live near the job and face rent you cannot afford. Move away and transportation costs eat the savings you were trying to build. This reshapes what a local workforce even means. A city can have thousands of jobs and still lack housing the people filling them can afford. When essential workers cannot live near their jobs, housing instability stops being a private family problem. It becomes a labor problem, a transportation problem, and a problem for the whole community. For some families, homelessness does not begin on a sidewalk. It begins with folding down the back seat of a car. The vehicle becomes a bedroom, a storage unit, a changing room, and transportation to work, all at once. Clothes get packed into plastic bins. Blankets cover the windows at night. Phones charge while the engine idles. Meals are limited by having no refrigerator or kitchen. Every possession must fit into a space built for driving, not living. This form of homelessness is hard to measure. Street counts happen on a single night, and people sleeping in cars are often difficult for outreach workers to find. Recent counts identified over 740,000 people experiencing homelessness, including more than 260,000 living unsheltered, roughly 27% higher than a decade earlier. A family living in a vehicle may move constantly, parking near work one night and somewhere else the next. Many deliberately avoid attention, fearing they will be told to leave, ticketed, or reported to authorities. Living in a car creates a brutal daily routine. Where do you use a bathroom at 3 in the morning? Where do the kids change clothes? How do you cook a meal? What happens during a heat wave or freezing night? A car offers a locked door and some shelter from weather, but it is not stable housing. For many working families, the vehicle is the last barrier between instability and sleeping completely outside. That is what makes this so unsettling. A machine built to carry people to work has become the place some return to once the shift ends. Many Americans still picture homelessness as something obvious: a tent, a shelter line, someone on a sidewalk. But a large share of housing instability is far harder to see. A mother may wake before sunrise inside a minivan, take her children to a public restroom to get ready, drive them to school, then head to work. A warehouse employee might shower at a gym before a shift. A family may keep clothing folded neatly in the trunk so co-workers never suspect the car in the lot is also their bedroom. This is invisible homelessness. Official counts cannot capture every person cycling between vehicles, motels, relatives' homes, and other temporary arrangements. Point-in-time counts measure only a single night, while broader instability includes overcrowding, frequent moves, and struggling with rent. Federal health guidance recognizes these situations as forms of housing instability. The secrecy is often intentional. Parents fear how others will react if their situation becomes known. Workers worry about judgment from bosses or coworkers. Many do not even call themselves homeless. They say they are between places, staying in the car for now or saving for a deposit. But hiding the problem does not make it smaller or easier to live with. The family still has no permanent address. Sleep stays interrupted. Privacy disappears. Routines become complicated. This is one reason the housing crisis can be worse than it looks. You may not see tents everywhere. You may see clean clothes, working cars, kids attending school, and adults arriving at work on time. What you do not see is where some of those people go once the day ends. The housing crisis becomes even more alarming inside America's schools. Public schools recently identified more than 1.5 million children and youth experiencing homelessness in a single school year, a jump of over 12% from the year before, and the highest number ever recorded. These children are not all sleeping on sidewalks. Under federal education rules, student homelessness includes children living in shelters, motels, cars, or temporarily doubled up with other families after losing stable housing. A child sitting in an ordinary classroom may have spent the previous night in a vehicle or crowded into someone else's living room. The educational toll is serious. Nearly half of students experiencing homelessness were chronically absent, a rate over 20 percentage points higher than their classmates. Constant moves, transportation problems, trauma, and unmet needs all make showing up harder. Imagine finishing homework without a desk, reliable internet, or a quiet room. Imagine taking a test after sleeping in a cramped car. These children may move repeatedly, lose supplies, or struggle to keep friendships because they never know how long they will stay in one place. Federal law provides important protections for eligible homeless students, including help staying enrolled. But no law can turn a vehicle into a bedroom. This is why America's housing crisis is also an education crisis. When over 1.5 million students are identified as homeless in a single year, unstable housing is no longer an isolated family emergency. It is shaping an entire generation of American children, quietly, from the back seat of a car to a classroom desk, and back again each day. For a financially comfortable household, a rent increase might mean fewer restaurant meals or a canceled vacation. For a family already spending half its income on housing, another $200 or $300 a month can destroy the budget. Recent national housing analysis shows how little room many low-income renters have left. The country has roughly 11 million extremely low-income renter households, and more than 2 out of every 3 of them face severe housing cost burdens, meaning over half their income goes toward housing alone. Now, picture a family already paying $1,500 a month. If rent rises to $1,750, that adds up to $3,000 extra dollars a year. The family does not receive a matching raise. Groceries do not get cheaper. Insurance premiums do not drop. Childcare costs stay exactly where they were. The family has to find that money somewhere. First, savings stop growing. Then credit cards start covering groceries. Medical appointments get delayed. Car maintenance gets ignored. Parents may pick up extra hours, if any are available. Eventually, there is nothing left to cut. This matters because homelessness is often imagined as one dramatic event. In reality, financial collapse tends to happen gradually. A rent increase in January creates credit card debt by March. A car repair in May wipes out whatever savings remained. By August, the family is behind on rent, and an eviction notice may soon follow. The final crisis looks sudden from the outside. But for the family living through it, the countdown had been running for months, one small shortfall stacking quietly on top of the last. Losing an apartment is not simply about packing boxes and finding another place to live. An eviction filing can push a family into a financial chain reaction that makes securing the next home far harder. Recent tracking of eviction cases found well over 1 million filings in a single recent year, with an average filing rate near 8%, roughly one filing for every 13 renter households across the country. Once a family loses housing, the next landlord may check credit and rental history. At the same time, the family often needs application fees, a security deposit, first month's rent, moving costs, and utility deposits all at once. Imagine needing $4,000 just to walk into another apartment after falling behind because you were short by only $1,000. That is the trap. Eviction also disrupts daily life far beyond housing. A longer commute can threaten a job. Children may face new schools or routines. Belongings may need to be stored or left behind. A parent searching for housing may miss work completing applications and visiting apartments. An eviction filing does not always mean a family is physically removed from a home. The filing is just the start of a legal process. But even the threat of losing housing can force desperate decisions. Some families move into motels, others move in with relatives, some split apart, living in different homes, and some move into a car. Once a family crosses from struggling renter to displaced household, the crisis becomes far harder to escape. Losing an apartment can happen quickly. Getting back into stable housing can take much longer. One of the biggest misunderstandings about America's housing crisis is the belief that struggling families could simply find somewhere cheaper. For millions of renters, that cheaper housing does not exist in enough supply. National housing research points to a shortage of more than 7 million affordable and available rental homes for roughly 11 million extremely low-income renter households. Nationwide, there are only about 35 affordable homes for every 100 of those households. This shortage touches every state and every major metro area. Picture that as a line of 100 families searching for housing. Only 35 affordable units exist for all of them. The remaining families do not disappear. They get pushed higher into the rental market, where housing eats an even larger share of income. Many double up with relatives, accept overcrowded conditions, or stay in unstable housing while searching. The problem grows worse because a unit can sit empty and still not count as affordable to the household that needs it. An apartment renting for $1,500 is technically available, but that means nothing to a worker whose income can only support $700 or $800 in rent. Recent reporting also notes that 3 out of 4 eligible renter households receive no housing assistance at all. So when someone asks, why don't they just get a cheaper apartment? These numbers are the answer. Millions of households are competing for a supply dramatically smaller than the need. America does not simply have families making poor housing choices. It has a real, measurable shortage of affordable homes at the bottom of the rental market. Between an apartment and a car, many families pass through another hidden stage of the housing crisis, the motel room. For a displaced family, a motel can feel like it solves the problem. There is a bed, a bathroom, electricity, heat, or air conditioning. The children are indoors. But temporary lodging can quietly become a financial trap. A room costing $100 a night adds up to $3,000 over 30 days. Even $70 a night reaches $2,100 a month. Yet families paying these amounts may still fail to qualify for an apartment because they lack a deposit, carry damaged credit, face screening barriers, or cannot document the income a landlord requires. This creates one of the cruelest contradictions in the housing crisis. A family can spend more on a motel than an apartment would cost, while still locked out of the traditional rental market entirely. Federal education rules specifically recognize motel living as a form of homelessness for eligible children and youth. National data shows schools identified more than 1.5 million homeless students in a recent year, based on where those students actually slept each night. Motel living also makes ordinary family life difficult. Cooking gets limited to a microwave. Laundry becomes another expense. Families live from suitcases, children have little privacy, and parents constantly calculate how many more nights they can afford. Then, the money runs out. The motel was never permanent housing. It was only a waiting room between losing a home and whatever comes next. For some working families, what comes next is the parking lot outside. At night, a parking lot can become something completely different than it was during the day. After businesses close and traffic disappears, cars settle quietly into corners. Inside some of those vehicles are people trying to sleep before another day of work. This is part of America's growing unsheltered homelessness crisis. Recent counts found more than 260,000 people living unsheltered on a single night, up roughly 36% over the past decade. Not everyone sleeping in a vehicle is easy to spot. A tent stands out. A minivan with covered windows can look like an empty parked car. People often move before sunrise, park somewhere new each night, and deliberately avoid drawing attention. This creates an underground nightly routine. Families search for spots near restrooms that stay open all night. Workers try to park close enough to their job to save gasoline. Parents look for areas that feel safer for their kids. Some sleep lightly, half waiting for a knock from a guard or officer. A few communities have created safe parking programs, offering designated overnight spots and connections to services. But availability varies, and vehicle residents still face the same basic question: where can they legally and safely stay overnight? This is how parking lots become invisible neighborhoods. The residents hold no leases. They may never meet one another. By morning, the entire community can vanish. Then, after dark, some of those same vehicles return once again. America's housing crisis is not only visible beneath bridges and encampments. Sometimes it is a streetlight, doors locked, an alarm set for work the next morning. Homelessness is often treated as a problem affecting one narrow group of people. The national numbers tell a much larger story. Recent counts identified over 740,000 people experiencing homelessness on a single night, roughly 27% higher than a decade earlier. Unsheltered homelessness rose about 36% over that period, while chronic homelessness climbed even further. The people at risk are not all living the same story. Older adults are an especially serious concern. Researchers describe adults 50 and older as the fastest-growing age group among people experiencing homelessness, with numbers projected to triple within a few years. Then there are single parents on one income, young workers entering a rental market with almost no savings, families recovering from divorce or the loss of a second paycheck, people whose hours got cut, workers in expensive cities who earn too much to fit the image of extreme poverty, yet cannot cover local housing costs. That is what changed. Housing instability now reaches households that look financially normal. They may have a car, smartphones, work clothes, a regular paycheck. Their children may attend school every day. But visible possessions do not reveal how much money is left in the bank. A family can look middle class while using credit cards to buy groceries and falling a month behind on rent. The modern housing crisis is creating a wider zone of vulnerability. The distance between doing okay and losing stable housing can be far smaller than most Americans realize. For some households, it is no longer measured in years. It is measured in a single missed paycheck. A $400 emergency does not sound like a crisis. But when a household has almost no savings, it can be the first falling domino. Recent surveys of household finances show how thin some emergency cushions are. Roughly 18% of adults said the largest expense they could cover from savings was under $100. Another 13% said they could handle only $100 to $500 from savings. That means nearly 1 in 3 adults reported savings below $500 for an emergency. Now, imagine the transmission fails on the car used to reach work. The repair costs $2,000. A child needs unexpected medical care. A parent loses a week of paid hours. The refrigerator breaks. An insurance deductible comes due. Recent federal data found 16% of adults had not paid all their bills in the previous month, and roughly 26% skipped medical care in the past year due to cost. These numbers show what financial fragility looks like right before homelessness happens. A family may charge the emergency to a credit card. The minimum payment climbs. The next paycheck covers the car and utilities, but nothing else. Another bill goes unpaid. Fees appear. Interest builds. The emergency itself might last a day. The financial damage can last months. That is why medical bills, car repairs, and lost work hours matter so much in a housing story. When a family has no financial buffer, an unrelated emergency can eventually threaten the rent. Homelessness does not always begin with losing a job. Sometimes it begins with a check engine light. When a family loses housing, many Americans assume government assistance becomes available right away. The reality is often far more complicated. Public housing and rental assistance programs use income limits that vary by location and household size. Lower income limits are generally set near 80% of an area's median income, while very low income limits sit near 50%. Local incomes differ, so eligibility shifts from one housing authority to the next. But meeting an income requirement does not mean a family receives housing. Recent reporting found 3 out of 4 eligible renter households received no housing assistance at all. The country has millions more low-income households needing affordable housing than it has subsidized units and assistance resources. Waiting lists are often closed. Some major housing authorities keep their voucher wait lists shut, requiring families to wait for a public announcement and a future lottery before they can even apply. This helps explain the gap working families fall into. A parent may still earn income, but not enough to cover market rent. The family may technically qualify yet still face limited availability. They may need paperwork, applications, and calls to multiple agencies while trying to hold a job and care for their children. Meanwhile, the housing emergency is happening right now. The motel bill is due tonight. The car needs gasoline tomorrow. The kids need to reach school Monday morning. Housing systems operate through applications, eligibility rules, and limited funding. Family crises operate by the hour. For a working family living in a vehicle, being technically eligible and actually receiving stable housing remain two very different things. The traditional American housing path was supposed to move forward in steps. Rent a small apartment, save money, buy a starter home, build equity, and reach stability. That path is becoming much harder to follow. Recent housing research found existing home sales fell to about 4 million recently, the lowest in 3 decades. The national homeownership rate declined too, its first annual drop in 8 years. The pressure is especially visible among first-time buyers. Recent data shows first-time buyers made up only 21% of all home buyers, a record low. The typical first-time buyer was 40 years old, an all-time high. Even the down payment barrier keeps climbing. The median down payment for first-time buyers reached 10%, the highest for that group in decades. But the monthly payment may be the biggest shock. Researchers estimate mortgage costs for a typical first-time buyer using a small down payment rose from around $1,200 a month to more than $2,500 today. The income needed to afford that payment climbed from under $70,000 a year to well over $130,000. This creates a housing traffic jam. Renters cannot save because housing costs consume their income. They cannot buy because prices, payments, and down payments are too high. Moving is expensive. Staying is expensive. For millions of younger Americans, the question is shifting from when will I buy a house to can I afford to live at all? The American dream did not just get more expensive. For many working households, the first step toward it is vanishing. The most disturbing part of America's housing crisis is not the number of people without homes. It is the breakdown of the connection between employment and housing stability. Recent national counts identified more than 740,000 people experiencing homelessness on a single night, including over 260,000 unsheltered, about 27% higher than a decade earlier. At the same time, federal data found 16% of adults had not paid all their bills in a recent month. Put these realities together, and a person can have a steady income and still have no financial margin. They can wake up in a car at 5:30 in the morning, shower at a gym, and arrive for an 8-hour shift in clean clothes. Coworkers may sit beside them at lunch without realizing everything that person owns is packed into the vehicle outside. This is a different image of homelessness than what most Americans were taught to recognize. Employment still matters, but a job cannot guarantee housing if the paycheck cannot cover the home nearby. That is the warning inside this crisis. America has workers building products, delivering packages, caring for others, cleaning buildings, cooking food, and keeping businesses running, while some struggle to find a place to sleep. The housing system has reached a point where steady work and homelessness can exist inside the same life. When a family can work all week and still sleep in a car, the question is no longer whether they worked hard enough. The question is, what happened to a housing market where a paycheck no longer guarantees a roof? When working all day is no longer enough to put a roof over your family's head, America has a much bigger problem than homelessness. Have you seen families living in cars where you live? And click the next video on your screen, because America's homeless crisis is spiraling even further out of control.